Episode of Code Concepts with Pete Roque and Rachel Patterson. Our friend Rachel isn't available at the moment. She's at a different venue, but she will be joining us momentarily. Today we have two special guests. Today's 3/11, which is National 311 Day. So we have the two, what we call OGs of the 311 universe. We have Janice Quintana and we have Lisa Allen joining us today to talk about 311. So let me introduce both of them. First, we have Janice Quintana, who is a self-proclaimed government nerd. I can attest to that. She works in local government and customer service and service delivery space for different municipalities. She was the director for the Mayor's Customer Service Center in Washington, D.C., and became the director of the Office of Unified Communications, which offers both 911 and 311. She also implemented the 311 organizations in 2008. She later became the 311 director of Charlotte, North Carolina, and Atlanta, Georgia. And she is a go-to person for all things 311. Yes, she is. And also, we have Miss Lisa Allen on with us. Lisa Allen is the call center director for the city of Baltimore. Baltimore was actually the first city in the country to implement the 311 number. So kudos. And started out as a non-emergency call center in partnership with the Department of Justice, given the success and the notoriety of Baltimore. It was a successful project and it was fitting, and pretty much the call center has been the recipient of several prestigious and awards and strives to continue to be innovative and an industry leader in the 311 world. So welcome, ladies. Thank you for coming on. It's a mouthful. 311, nationally recognized number. For those that know what 411 is, if it still exists, you call in, hey, what time is it? They will tell you the time. 311 is for non-emergency municipal services. All things that you need assistance with. 311 is there, similar to 911 system for emergency systems where you for calls for service. So with that, I'm gonna start off with Ms. Janice. Janice, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you started in the 311, and then we'll move on to Lisa.
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I started working private industry in the call center world for MCI, and I moved to the Virginia Beach area. And then I moved to Arlington, Virginia, and MCI folded, so I got recruited by the headhunter to come and run the mayor's call center in DC because he wanted someone with that kind of private industry background. It was already created. And then I moved on to be the director of 911, and then I implemented 311, and then moved to North Carolina to be the director of 311 in Atlanta. And that's how it all started. It started in a call center background and got recruited by someone to come and work in local government. And so, 18, 20 years later, here I am. I'm now consulting for a company that's called CityBot, that is a AI chatbot tech solution that works with local government. So that's how I got in local government.
Awesome. And Lisa, how did you venture into 311?
Well, I actually was in change management and operations and customer service in the private industry for a while. And I was recruited by the mayor of Baltimore at that time because the vision was that we wanted to use 311 not only as a non emergency number, which was then answered by police officers, but pulling in general city services and information in an effort to actually measure how the city was performing in city services and in services that our citizens and customers were wanting the city of Baltimore to do. So I was recruited by the city of Baltimore to consolidate the call centers that were all over the world, all over the city. What happens in government back then was if you didn't know what somebody was doing or you didn't have a job for them, you told them to answer the phone. Well, that was the government, but back then we decided that we were going to come in with a professional call center, and we actually transitioned the police non-emergency number, which was being answered by police officers, to a civilian group, and we started to consolidate all the call centers, and that's how we came up to use 311 as just the general service number or your one call to City Hall for the city of Baltimore. So that's how I started. I was going to actually pull that project together. I decided that would probably take about 5 years, but I'm still there and love it.
No, it's funny. So, I know it's 311. So now, is 311 normally used? It's normally used for non-emergency numbers across the United States, correct? So, what are the kind of calls that you normally would get for 311?
Mhm. Well, I don't think it was normally used for non-emergency. That's what Baltimore, and why we were the first city to use it as another number or another number in the city. We decided to try to take and see how many calls we could take off of 911 if we promoted a 311 number for things that don't need medical, fire, or police emergencies. So I don't know how many people, consolidated those groups, but we did. So it's usually 311 is used. Again, in Baltimore, you call 311 for anything. Visitors know it, the customers know it, the citizens know it. We answer anything with the exception of people calling, and they got that down now. For people's phone numbers, we don't do that. We get calls about any and everything. What time do the Ravens play? I need the street cleaned. So we answer it all. Our goal is we have 100% resolution in call intake in that center. We do not transfer. We leave folks in the agencies available to do the work that needs to be done.
Awesome. So, so in many respects, let's say, for example, I called about my, like I worked in city government before, and a lot of times you get a call and you have to route the call. So 311 normally folks are trained to know where the call goes. That way you maximize the amount of efficiency to jurisdiction, correct?
We use a CRM tool to make sure that we capture all of the calls, which is configured to move that call to the appropriate agency. And one thing about Baltimore is we have a full circle. We not only do customer service, we do good service delivery, and we measure that. So we measure that by we taking the call in 311. We've pushed it out through technology to the correct agency. They do as they may with it based on an estimated SLA and go back into the CRM tool and leave us notes or close it out. In that way, we can analyze how long it has taken for each call from the time it got to the call center to the time that the agency closed it out. So that's another caveat with Baltimore. We actually branded that as a city stat project. So that too has taken off in many areas of the country, called other things, but it's definitely a performance management tool.
Yeah.
So,
So,
to answer your question really quick, Peter, is that the 301 employees are really well versed because they take, like Lisa said, everything, and they learn so much. I know that I lost a lot of people in the cities that I worked at, and I'd get mad because they were poaching my employees, and the mayor would say, no, it's a positive thing. So people like to get City 301 employees in different areas because they're used to working and talking to constituents and angry constituents, and they know the system. And so they are really well versed.
me working in municipal government and actually being in a complaint center, answering those complaints, 100%, that's a special skill within itself, especially, I always compare, municipal government with, your server. You bring a dish and the person's mad and you're like, hey, why are you blaming me? It was the cook. But, it's, when you're answering these calls for service, we always have to maintain our the best foot forward customer service, and like Lisa said, good service delivery. That's so important because you know what, this is sometimes you guys are frontline staff that you guys are the face of whatever jurisdiction you're servicing in
Mm-hmm.
311. So you have to give that you have to maintain that persona, saying what, we're friendly, we're customer service oriented, we want to help you, we want to get you to the right people to resolve your issues. So compliance is such a awesome tool. So now in your jurisdictions that you served in North Carolina and Georgia, can you tell us, is there any difference in the 311 systems, or are they pretty much basically the same?
Most of the 301s have a few things in common, like potholes or solid waste services type of calls. But what was unique in Charlotte and also in Atlanta is that they took all the utility water calls. So not just like a leak outside. They did the billing and they took calls of people about their water bill. So that was very unique. A lot of 301 cities do not take water calls. And then what was unique about DC is that it is a city, a county, and a state. So we took calls for the Department of Motor Vehicles, which is about 900,000 calls just by itself. That wouldn't happen in any other city because that's a state function. So there is a basic foundation across the board, but every city is unique. And Lisa, you can talk about, Baltimore being unique.
Yeah. Both the way Baltimore is unique, and like Janice said, they're very, very, very. There are a lot of variations around the country, but in Baltimore, ours is we answer, of course, within the city limits, but in the county limits, we also answer the phone for water issues. So that's where we are unique. We do have a separate water billing system, water billing center, but we do answer the calls if there are issues or things that the county has to deal with regarding water. So I would say that is our most unique thing, that we go outside the city limits to answer those calls only for the county.
And that was unique with Charlotte too. I'm sorry. It's Charlotte Mecklenburg County, and it was called CharMec 311 because we did take county calls too.
Mm-hmm.
So now, in your experience, do you see that as technology is moving forward, is it moving more towards like a smartphone application, and if so, what kind of folks are you are assigned to those type of roles, like versus the call center versus maybe answering somebody online?
Mm-hmm. Well, what we're seeing, and we're moving technology as it goes forward. We do have a mobile app. You can put service requests in on the web, but from my experience and from the data, Baltimore is a big data city. People are actually calling 311 more. I know a lot of the hypothesis around leveraging technology is that it would reduce the phone traffic. We're not finding that. And I think in Baltimore, we're not finding that because we answer the phone in a very timely fashion. We find that in my experience, if your wait times are a little longer, then people may go to other options to get their point across or put their service request in, because the mobile app and the web is very easy. It goes right to the same system it's no difference. It gets pushed to the agency just like any other if you called. But in Baltimore's experience, our telephone contacts far outnumber our technology. And of course, we're looking to leverage more technology such as chat and text as we go along. So we're working on that now. So that'll be interesting to see how many people maybe go to that portal to put in a service request.
What's funny, Pete, when we first started, Lisa and I, it was just all the building and phone. And so now 311 centers that are popping up that are new, they don't just have a brick and mortar. I think, Lisa, when we started, websites were just, going. There was no online services on websites and no apps and no, chat online. So there's a lot of different options. So I think the way you open your 311, if you offer those in the beginning, people may use them. But Baltimore is, the model. They were the first one. They gave that service on the phone, and that's what their community is used to. And most of the cities, I think, probably they still call a lot.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to know, because the way you and I, Janice, connected. I'm pretty sure that 311 gets a lot of code enforcement calls. Whether it's like and a lot of times it's you can't really solve code enforcement questions on a 311 call because you actually have to go out there and do an inspection.
Yeah.
There's a foul smell. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to send it to code enforcement, and so when you get those calls, you refer them to code. And you and I talked, and I always tell a story how we kind of got connected. Janice, Janice is a big presence on LinkedIn. I'm a big presence on LinkedIn. We reached out. She wrote an awesome article on me on the just code enforcement. And and to date, it's still the number one Google searched article out there, and I'm so proud of it. So thank you, Janice, for giving me that platform. But it's important for people to know that 311 and code enforcement do work hand in hand. Because you do get those calls like, hey, my neighbor's working in his front lawn on his, he's running an auto mechanic shop, so you get those crazy calls, and sometimes you sit there and you just can't make this stuff up. The call kind of calls you here, and I'm gonna ask you guys about those calls. I mean, what kind of calls do you guys get? 311 that you just like, it blows your mind.
Lisa, you take that. You're in the midst of it.
Yeah, well, you know what? We were just laughing yesterday, my team and I, about, reminiscing back since it's 311 day today, and just laughing at some of the calls. But I'll tell you, if we go to code enforcement, one of the challenges that we have as a customer service center and a call center is, again, I want to emphasize partnering with the agency for good service delivery. And it's important that we work very closely with code enforcement, because a lot of things need to be done in between before you close out or say a service request is complete. So that's a big challenge, because in code enforcement, they're going to send out somebody, as you said, Peter, to look. They're going to determine what's wrong. It's still not done, but they're going to push it to someone else to make sure. Maybe it's high grass and weeds. The inspector doesn't cut the grass. Maybe it's boarding that needs to be done. Maybe, as you said, it's a foul smell, so they have to determine where to, within their partnerships, to push that call to. So the customer is still waiting for something to be done. So we have to make sure we communicate with the customer that we did go out there. We talked to the person who owns the property. We're going to give them a chance to cut the grass themselves before we have to intervene. So it's very important that communication within that time they called to when the process is taking place, that the customer actually understands what's going on. So we pride ourselves on really working toward making sure people know what's going on in between, because when customers call about anything, when they call, they expect that grass to be cut and it to be gone the next day. I often make a joke about trash, and they say, "Oh, my trash got missed," or whatever, and they call back and say, "It's still out there." I said, "Well, you know what? The customer service agent didn't put you on hold. Put on a jumpsuit, go get your trash, and come back." So, you have to kind of, talk to customers and get them to understand in a nice way what has to go on, and communication in that period of time is very important. So, we get all kinds of calls, and we just have to adapt to what's going on. A young lady called once, non-emergency at that, and said that Domino's didn't put enough toppings on her pizza. So we often have to go back to those type of calls and kind of say, customers really think we do everything, and we feel good about that. We never say, "Oh, I can't believe they didn't call. They called about that." We want to be that face of the city, and you can call us about anything, because we politely will say, "Well, you know what?" So those these stories could go on and on.
Oh
So
yeah.
we get calls about everything, and we appreciate every call.
No, I bet somebody, in code enforcement, we get those random calls too. I've gotten, the kids screaming all night, newborn crying all night, and we need to do something about it. Well, it's a baby. I mean, it's gonna cry. So, I mean, it happens. So, so now when it comes, and this shows more focus around code enforcement, 311, and so now with 311, let's say a lot of times, code enforcement officers have their own, like, software, or in different jurisdictions they have their own software. Now, does that software, how does it communicate with 311? That way, if somebody calls back, do you guys look up the information and say, "You know what, and actually it got assigned to an officer, the officer went out there, and you need to call this number to follow up with them," or how does that work?
Well, again, we really discourage and don't transfer calls or refer calls to other people as much
Yeah.
as we can.
Mhm.
So, any interface, and yes, code enforcement is a very good example of that, because they have to track and keep up with when to go back and check, when to give a notice, when to maybe transfer the call to solid waste because the customer isn't, for example, cutting the grass within the allotted amount of time. So they do. So not only code enforcement, but some agencies do have an interface to kind of track their work. But it's important that that interface with or connect to our CRM tool, so we're constantly getting updates. And when customers again call, we're not going to send them to code enforcement just because we've kind of transferred the first call. We should be able to go in and see what stage every piece of that process is in, so that we can actually tell the customer, and we give the person a little bit of time to cut the grass. The next step is this, so please be patient, but always you can call back and see where that process is within your first call a few days ago. So the interface between a third party or a CRM tool that maybe the agency has, and there are not many in Baltimore. Everybody works out of our system. And again, if you don't, you have to make sure that your interface is telling our system what to do every step of the way.
And I've worked in jurisdictions where we had like an online reporting tool. We didn't have a 311, and that got assigned to me. I'm also doing other duties, and it's hard. I'm telling you right now, it's hard to track all these calls and calls for service. It is very difficult. So I kudos to 311 because you know what, that is a full-time job within itself. Being able to answer these, respond in a timely manner, get people the right information. There's a lot of jurisdictions that don't have a 311 system, and maybe they should, because it's just one of those. People have needs constantly all day long. So, let's say, for example, I'm in a jurisdiction and I just, the customer service, it just isn't there. How does one go about reaching out to like, to a, 311 vendor to get that thing started? How do I implement a 311 system in my jurisdiction if we don't have one?
Well, the first thing I would say, and we're lucky now, I mean, Janice and I talk about how long we've been around, but Neil, there are consortiums of us. So don't reinvent the wheel. Reach out to your fellow cities and counties and jurisdictions and see what they're doing and start there.
So I know, Janice, I know you speak to different organizations. So how do you get started with assisting somebody in getting that process going to help them with a 311 system?
Well, it really starts from the top. So you go to your mayor and you let him know all these different cities that have 311, some new ones that have opened up recently in the last few years, like Suffolk County and New York. People know the 311s are out there. Usually the new mayors will come in there, or you go speak with the mayor. Like Lisa said, it's a really close network, 311, and we have some organizations. And people are always willing to help. So that's how it really would start. Probably go to your city manager, your mayor, and show them different examples. Baltimore was the very first one, and her mayor went on to be a governor. And there's, Mayor Bloomberg created the one in New York City. Mayor Adrian Finty created the one in DC. So there is a lot of information now. It's a lot easier than it was before to start one.
Now, as far as 311, let's say my city. So I was in the city of Garden Grove, and I thought it was a great idea to have a 311 system. Now, let's say somebody does have a 311 system. How does one go about promoting it or having public outreach and let the public know, hey, we have a 311 system now. This is how it works. What are things that you would recommend for somebody to say, hey, you know what, 311 is used for so and so, or used for this? What are specific examples, that a normal person would say, hey, oh, look, I can use 311. What are some examples?
Well, in Baltimore, what we did, because again, it was unheard of, so we had to figure out how to get people to call 311 instead of look at literally an inch book, like a Yellow Pages book, and try to decide who does what. So really, our secret was that I've shared with everyone. Take those phone numbers, all those 200 million phone numbers that people used to call, and forward them into 311.
Mm-hmm.
So then, as time went on, people thought they were calling and going to hear the Department of Public Works. Now they hear, thank you for calling 311. Kind of startled them at first, but that really worked. And also, as Janice mentioned, the people at the top, your mayor, your city administrator, every time they're in the street, they have to remind people to call 311. We always knew when that happened, because people would call us up and say, the mayor was on TV. I wasn't listening. He told us to call 311. Well, he told you to call 311 for a specific thing, but you missed that. But it's okay. That was some of our promoting. It's okay. So that was our trick, because that was very tricky. For 200 years, people have been calling a million phone numbers. How do you get them to call one? You just forward those numbers into that one place.
And it's so different now too, because we have social media, you have communication teams. The old-fashioned way of going to community meetings, I had to do that a lot in DC, and then getting different ambassadors to, like Lisa said, the leadership, but directors from solid waste services, your council members, their staff, because they get a lot of calls for potholes and stuff like that too. So they help, push it forward. So Yeah, it's we put signs in the subway, at the bus stops,
Mhm.
um, just like any other kind of way. I think going out to community meetings is a big one too. That's nothing beats that.
Now, as far as 311 goes, is it important for jurisdictions once they get onto 311, that they make a commitment to be responsive? Because sometimes you could have a 311 system and, you just take a bunch of calls and people don't respond. So is it important for the cities that are implementing these to say, hey, we really need to, make sure we have those, those good customer service outputs as far as, being responsive, being, if you report a pothole, I'm out there within a certain amount of time. So it's important for jurisdictions or agencies to say, yeah, if we're going to get behind this, this needs to be part of the implementation.
Well, that's part of the whole process. I mean, when we started, we actually got with the agencies and asked them, and it was very funny. We said, "So, how long do you think it's going to take you to do this, so we can come up with the SLA?" But what data showed us as we went along was sometimes I would go back and say, "You're telling us to tell people this is going to take 20 days, but in using the data that I have from when the customers have called in and asked for this service, and you've done it." You've been doing it an average of 10 days. So can we lower the service request and the service level? And of course, that can go the other way. But it is extremely important for you to partner and make a full circle with your service delivery team and make sure they're on board. But being very patient, because once you can call a phone number and you get a service request that you can track and you expect service, the service has to take place. So we work very closely with agencies, because if not, the whole system doesn't work. Now,
Yeah.
of course, you see 311 didn't work to my example of we weren't doing the job. But you don't want to say that, because we're a partnership. You have to say that and support the agencies, but that is a very important part of the process. You also don't realize how much more work you get when people know what number to call.
And that's the beauty of 311 in the data. Before there wasn't that data, so we have a lot of this data to see that, maybe the department, and Lisa will agree, a lot of these agencies didn't like it in the beginning. If you can go back to them and say, you're not filling the pothole in 24 hours, it's taking you, 60 hours. And then working with them to say that maybe you should make the SLA a little bit longer, because what you want to do is manage the community's expectations.
Yeah.
If something's supposed to be done in 2 days and it's not getting done in 5 days, well, maybe you need to change SLA. We can't wait till you hire a lot of people. Maybe you're being a little bit too aggressive and it's not realistic. So that data with 311 is so important. And that's when Lisa had mentioned before that they started, was it Baltimore Stat? I think we had Cap Stat in DC, and a lot of cities have that, where you just look at that data. And I think 311 has led these cities in having data specialists and innovation teams and performance teams that really weren't there before, because that data wasn't there.
And I think, just listening to what both of you are saying, I think that as key performance indicators are very important when it comes to 311 systems. I've gone to jurisdictions where they don't keep any stats, or they don't, they can't tell you like how long something takes. They just kind of guesstimate. Oh, I think it'll take 2 weeks. Well, you know what? Historically, it's taken 10 days, like you said, or 7 days. So it's important to relay that to the public. Now, let's say, for example, I do call in about a pothole, and you say, hey, like, does it normally go online? Where in some jurisdictions, does it go online where I can check my service request, or do I have to call back? What are most jurisdictions doing nowadays?
Well, we mentioned social media. You can put your service request in on the web. You can use your mobile app. You also can check on a service request through those portals.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily have to call 311 to check on a service request. And also, when the work is done, you would get, if you left your email address, and everybody's kind of used to doing that now, you will get an email that says your service request has been complete. Now, does a couple of things. Maybe it wasn't completed to the customer satisfaction. That may trigger a call. And we want it to, because we want to make sure that we're doing things to people's satisfaction. So you can check your service request in Baltimore and all the portals that we have available, even if you called it into the call center.
So now with 311, I know, in, like, let's say, for example, the state of Florida just passed the ordinance that say that you can't file an anonymous complaint, because I know sometimes people want to report something and just don't want, they don't they feel that it's going to be retaliatory with the neighbor or something. So, do you guys take anonymous complaints, 311, or does somebody have to leave a number? I mean, how do different jurisdictions across the United States handle those types of concerns?
Well, in Baltimore, we will allow you to put in something anonymously, and we understand the safety and privacy of people. And we'll go out and check it out just like we would do any other service request. We just don't have anyone to communicate with. If the person that goes out to check it out has a question, we don't have anybody to communicate that with. But yes, you can leave anonymous complaints on all portals, calling, the web, and the mobile app.
Okay. And do you find that that's normal across the U.S. with folks that have 311, or Janice? Do you?
Yeah, it's pretty normal. I think the only time you really have to leave your name is, if it's something where someone's coming right on your property, like, for example, in DC, rat abatement, they may have to go put some poison in, whatever they put for the rats, and make sure your dog's not out there. But other than that, yeah, most jurisdictions allow anonymous.
That's awesome. And then now as far as what's I know with Baltimore, but with other jurisdictions, what's the normal volume of calls in a normal jurisdiction? What's the volume? What are we looking at per, let's say, per day, or per week, per month?
Well, in Baltimore, when we first started, we were getting well over 1 million calls a year. And that also kind of equated to how your service delivery was doing, and people knowing I'm going to call and just tell everything. We're down now to about 700,000 calls a year.
Wow.
So that's still a lot. We have a population of 650,000.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
think
yeah,
what's so Yeah, and what also happens is when you first open a 311 center, the call volume really goes up, and then services start getting better. The other agencies are held accountable, so people aren't calling as much. So they go up and then they kind of go down. But during this past year, and Lisa and I were just getting information from other cities. It's ironically that you're asking that. In FY21, because of COVID, there was a whole bunch of different calls. 311 really showed its weight in the value because they started being used for 311 testing and vaccinations and different services that were falling behind, what have you, because people got like trash pickup because a lot of the workers got COVID or were exposed. So a lot of cities took a lot more calls. So I think DC took about 2 million calls, but they also handle everything, a city, county. I think we saw Denver had 500,000 calls, Baltimore was 2 million calls, Philly was over 1 million calls. So it depends, and a lot of calls are driven by what's seasonal, or if there's like the protesting in Minneapolis, there was probably a lot of calls there. I don't know if but the 311 there was in a police precinct and it got burned down during those protesting. And a lot of cities did get calls during that protests because 311 was really helping 911, call us for this. So it all depends on the time, the city, and what's happening in the public at the time.
Wow. So there's like with code enforcement, there's an evolution of duties. Just like you said, like with COVID, we started getting the calls of like, hey, these people are operating like, very low key. The guy's getting his barber, he's opening up his barber shop.
Oh, yeah.
So we got those calls, or people building stuff to, just to like the COVID calls. Same thing with the marijuana dispensaries. I mean, there's an evolution of code enforcement, and it just keeps growing. Stormwater, or what's the new one right now going on? Short-term rentals. We're getting those type of calls now. Have you seen an evolution in 311 since you've been doing this 2008 and beyond? What have you seen a crazy evolution in 311 in the type of calls?
I think, like Janice said, it's based on what's going on. And we have seen that because what everyone is doing is depending more on 311 to get information out. People already know to call. They know 311 is knowledgeable of things that are going on. So I think, to Janice's point, it really depends on what's going on. And things can spike in 311 just like they do in 911. If you have an accident, everybody's going to call with cell phones. They're going to call 911. The same thing happens in 311. If there's an event, water's running down the street, and all of a sudden it starts shooting out the street, everyone's going to call. So to the up to the minute what's going on event, to planned events, to unplanned events, to COVID. People really count on 311 now to get things out. During COVID, we were telling people where to pick up food, where to get services, all types of things, where to get tested. That's kind of died off now, but then the other things will come up.
Yeah. So one of the other questions that I had was when, when with 311, do you when you have a volume of calls, let's say for certain areas, like, when you're doing your data points, that you're like, okay, this area is very concentrated for this type of service. Does the jurisdiction normally look at that data and say, you know what, maybe we need to focus on this part of town? Does 311 assist with that?
Again, the data starts with 311 because everyone calls there to get city services. We actually map certain service requests so that agencies can actually deploy resources better. And also, we find that agencies use the 311 data to also determine not only if they're deploying resources, but if they have enough resources.
And it's also used for predictive analytics. You can look at maybe where there's a bunch of potholes after the snow in one street and say, well, maybe the draining isn't right, and that's why water is sitting there, because every year we get a bunch of calls for this. So let's go fix that. So yes, what Lisa said, the data, it all starts with the data.
This is one of the questions that's why I had the question was, when you do get these types of, a lot of times it's you throw your resource at it, it solves a bigger problem. So you get those I'm not saying that you want to reduce your calls, but you focus on the needs of that particular jurisdiction. And it all comes from 311. And a lot of folks may not realize the importance of that data. And it just morphs. So I think it's important to, like, with any type of city service, that you keep that data and you, like, analyze it and say, hey, these are the community needs and this is where we need to focus our resources. Yeah. So now, is there any particular type of do you guys have any good stories as far as 311? Like, you're like, hey, this turned into a bigger, do you have any stories like that? I always love stories.
Stories are always interesting. We have, I'm sure Janice, especially Janice and I, we talk about it all the time. Again, I can't just stress how many people do call 311 and how many people depend on 311 for both things that they need to know, things they need to do. Even the school system, we've actually helped the school system by doing some outreach in terms of making sure children have the shots before they go to school. You always have those funny stories about the folks calling about the pizza and the baby crying and those types of things. But the real story is in how we're helping the citizens and the visitors of Baltimore, because we get a lot of visitors in Baltimore, again, especially depending on events. We just hosted a major basketball tournament this last week. So, you've got a lot of people coming into the city that don't know. So, you may think that some of their stories are interesting and funny, but we have to go back and say we appreciate the visitors and they don't know. So we've got to help them navigate. So, stories are endless, but we appreciate every one of them.
Now, with code enforcement, we have your frequent flyers. So, do you have frequent flyers at the 311? So,
Not only for code enforcement, but for a lot of other things. So yes, we do. And once again, we appreciate them because they tell us what's going on. We also, as Janice said, you use data to be proactive. We also have folks that we realize that their recycling is always missed. And when we dig into it, we realize they're putting it out there on the wrong day. So we do try to cut down our frequent flyers that we can educate. We use the data to educate customers or even educate blocks and find that maybe that signage was a little confusing. So yes, we do have people that we kind of know by heart.
That's awesome. And that's, you do get those calls where, somebody's getting parking tickets and they're like, there's no sign. And, you realize, hey, there's no sign. So, you go out there and go install a sign, or refer it over to Public Works and say, hey, we need a sign out there. People are getting confused and stuff. So that's always good to hear. It's always good to hear. So now as far as 311, is there a national association for 311? Is there for 311 operators, or is there any type of association for like any conferences that normally people in the 311 industry would be part of?
Janice,
Yes, yeah, there are, and Lisa and I have been there at the forefront of the beginning of them. Unlike 911 that has a big, huge, like APCO and NENA kind of organization, there are two that are very, very helpful, and they do have conferences, and they do have a nice community. And one is called Engage 311, and they'll be having a conference in May. I think it's going to be in person, and that's in Phoenix. And the other one that's been around longer is called the AGCCP. It's Association of Government Call Center Professionals, and that is it's a low fee to join it, and it's by city, not by person, so it's really affordable. And they have a really great conference too, and they have really good webinars and a community board. Like if you wanted to go and ask something about a CRM or technology, and people are very willing to respond. The Engage 311 is just a breakout conference at a CS Week, which is a utility conference, but a lot of people go to that one too, and they have some webinars. So they're both very good organizations, especially for someone who wants to start a 311 or learn about a 311. It's a really great group of people.
Awesome. Very, very nice. So also, let's say somebody wanted to start a 311 system in their jurisdiction. Is there any grants available, or what's the I guess the foundation of build one? How does a community start this?
Well, I don't know about every city, but I know in Atlanta's 311, they received a grant from Bloomberg's philanthropy, like a lot of cities do. He gives grants to different cities for different reasons, and Atlanta did receive a Bloomberg grant.
That's awesome. Cool. And we have Rachel joining us. So how you doing, Rachel?
Good morning, you beautiful ladies and Pete. I'm
Oh,
so
nice.
sorry I was late to the party. I had an appointment this morning that ran late, but I had so many questions for you amazing women. Just looking up a little bit about what you two do. I don't know exactly what you've talked about already, but thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for providing a service that most people or most community members don't even know exists. For myself, I've used it for the simplest thing of what's going on with the road over here. Why is this closed? Or, what's going on? So thank you for what you do. And really, that was my question is, how do you engage your community leaders in getting them to understand that this service is so important and powerful, and that there's a group out there that offers it? What are some suggestions that you might have to go back and talk to my leaders about? How do we get this awesome service here?
I think that, we touched on it, really starts at the top. Your city leader, your mayor, your city council, your city administrator, you have to make sure that you have buy-in, or at least they support the system. And usually, as we've gone over the years, mayors embrace 311. Ones that don't have 311 will reach out and figure out what to do. In Baltimore, because we've been here so long, I don't know what citizens would do if we tried to change the process. So they're our biggest supporters. I mean, it's very easy to dial 3 numbers and move on and get something done. So
Right.
we've been here so long, people just know, visitors know, we have billboards, visitors know to call 311. So,
And just for a little history, there are over like 350 311s now, and they're also in Canada. So Canada, Toronto and Calgary, and all of them have 311 centers too. So there's so many now that when a new mayor comes in or someone wants to go to mayor and talk to it, there's so much research. They can go right next door. They can, all the mayors know each other. They can call each other and get feedback. And the number's been used in a lot of different ways. The Navy has a 311. The Veterans Administration has a VA 311, and the country of Panama has Panama 311. So it's been adopted in a lot of different ways. Some states are looking to see if they can have a state 311. I know Maryland was looking at that at one time, and Pennsylvania. So the number has taken off. So it's not too hard to convince a mayor that you need a 311 number to help your community.
So what I'm hearing is I need you two to come to Colorado to help me convince, because I'm not doing a good enough job.
Where do you live in Colorado?
Well, right now I'm in the Westminster area, but
Well, you have Denver and
Denver.
Denver does use 311, and they're a
Mm-hmm.
huge supporter of it. I mean, these larger municipalities you tend to see have these services. As most of you know, I work in a very small town. So, utilizing a service like this isn't necessarily something that they're interested in right now, only because they don't know about the power and the beauty of what this can do. So thank you for coming on today, and thank you for.
The beauty is too, a lot of small cities have 311, right? It's not all just big cities. There's a lot of, very small cities that utilize 311 too.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great
idea. I think personally it's important that, when I pitch an idea to any mayor or city managers, I personally always come with a lot of like an arsenal of information. So let's say, for example, with these associations that provide education of 311 or resources 311, do any of them have any like templates or any statistics on what other cities are doing, or would you recommend more like just reach out to a neighboring city, say, hey, how did you guys do it? Because Baltimore may be, I rather look at Baltimore than Denver. So is there any resources out there for a general person to say, hey, mayor, city manager, this is what 311 does, this is what it can do, and this is what I want to see, would like to see implemented?
Well, again, the family of 311 is always willing to help. I know personally, I get a lot of phone calls. I'm willing to help. I'm willing to share, and everyone in the group's willing to do that. As Janice said, 311 is really taken off. So most mayors know they can call another mayor if they really have a question, and those questions usually funnel back down to us. But the family of 311 now is it's incredible. You can just call someone, and we're always willing to help. It's no need anymore to reinvent the wheel. So I think that's a very positive thing.
And this is why we have the OGs of the 311 system on the call today. I say, you know what? Just go straight to the source. We have questions, and I try to ask these questions for the general public. I've been in, I've used 311 myself. So, but to me, I think it's important for those in different jurisdictions to say, hey, this is a system that may work for us. It may be a benefit to our constituents. It may be a benefit to make us more accountable to the public. And it's important for me. Data is so vital and so crucial to. And if you guys don't know Rachel, she's Miss Customer Service. She would be a great 311 person. In my opinion, and she's a great code enforcement person, but her heart is in customer service. And what I'm hearing today is 311 is based around customer service and good service delivery. I mean, that's bottom line. That's what I'm hearing today.
Mhm.
That's what 311 is. We're here to serve the public and service their needs, and their needs are met. So
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
We're proud of the brand, and we love that it works. I mean, someone told me so I said I ran 311 here, and some lady at the parking lot of grocery store said, "Oh, I love it. They're so great." And I don't even run it anymore, but I felt so proud about it.
You should. You should. You're amazing, and what you ladies have done is just amazing.
And just growing it and being from the start, and I'm seeing how it's blossoming even more. And I mean, you just mentioned it's in Panama. I'm like, I've never done anything, now it's in Panama. So, but thank you for all the information. It's been great. I think those jurisdictions that don't have 311 would benefit from a 311 system.
Absolutely.
These ladies are available. They're a wealth of knowledge. Janice and Lisa, thank you very much for coming on this National 311 Day on 311. Very fitting. Janice was the brainchild of this. She goes, let's do it on 311. I'm like, oh, duh.
We always just use 311 as an unofficial day, but it is now a National 311 Day. I want to give a shout out to the cities that really made it, on the calendar, and that's San Jose, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, Oakland, and Santa Clara. In 2020, they got together and paid for it to happen and get us on the calendar. So it is a national day, and there are cities like, I think, mayors come and take calls on 311 Day. I know, Lisa, your mayor is going to be there. New Orleans mayor was there. They had a big crawdad, crawfish celebration and music, and people really go all out, and it's really nice. A lot of times the mayors do come in and take calls, and that is really great because they'll say, wow, that's a lot of calls for broken meters. That's a lot of calls for, you're helping them with the call. And then the constituents love when they say, is this really the mayor? So
Yeah, right.
I don't know. What is your mayor going to do today, Lisa?
Well, he's had a couple of things going on today, and I'm happy to say too, the whole city embraces 311. In fact, it was a celebration today at 12, and because Lisa can't tell time in specific, I had to tell them I'll catch them soon after I get off the call. But we go all out. We have proclamations from the mayor. It's very interesting. We are all working remotely now. We've been working remotely now for 2 years. And one of the things that we celebrate when you're together in 311, I mean, we would have had our luncheons, we had everything. The room is decorated. It's really a big deal. It really is. And the proclamation from the mayor and the national recognition we really take that very seriously. And we're very proud of that.
It's always important for your leadership to see what you guys do from, because like I said, a lot of people don't realize that you guys are front staff. You guys are the face of your jurisdictions. And, even though they don't see your face, they hear your voice. But, you're still front line, front and center. And, that's something to be proud of. And especially, with a customer service background, that's always important in any jurisdiction because, at the end of the day, we're here to serve our public. So,
that's right.
So, but with that, thank you very much for both being here today. I told you an hour would swing by really fast, which it did. I'm pretty sure we missed a bunch of topics and a bunch of good stories, but it always happens. But thank you on this National 311 Day, also International Women's Month. Thank you, ladies, for being on here. It's thank you very much for all your contributions in the 311 system and just in our building industry, in our municipal government industry. So thank you very much. And
thank you for having us. Thank you for this was a great forum for us to brag about 311. So we really appreciate it.
Oh, I love it. You're 311. I'm code enforcement. We get together and just party all day long,
Ladies, thanks for letting me pop on and hear the last little bit. I echo exactly what Pete said. Thank you for your efforts in bringing the communities together, but not only the communities, but getting your leadership to see what you do. And no better way to do that than have them answer those calls. So thank you for your continued support of being public servants as well. You're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
No problem. All right. Thank you, ladies. And I'll see you guys next week. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye.